Hello, you are watching Your Daily Fix with Atieno Nyarkasagam, recording live from Detroit, Michigan. Today is the 8th of December 2014. Today's episode will take a look at poverty. And I would like to use various experiences that I have had within the city of Detroit and reflective analysis of poverty in Africa to bring poverty back down to earth for young folks like myself who have either encountered poverty on the day-to-day or are going to encounter the true meaning of poverty progressively, especially once they are done, with education, formal education, and begin to have to fend for themselves. Now, poverty has always been very aloof for me because as the last born in a family of three, during the period in time when I was growing up, my parents had already reached a relatively stable income level, perhaps in the lower middle class, I would propose. And I didn't need to struggle, and I didn't see the kind of gritty struggle that I'd like to describe that I see now in my life here in Detroit. So my coming into consciousness of what this really means has come pretty late, but I will dive in with no hesitation. So I want to frame poverty as a prison in which you might have the opportunity to eat. You might have a place to sleep. You might have the opportunity to engage in leisure and sporting activity. You might even have, if you're lucky, access to internet or to literature, to education. But ultimately, you are in prison. You are in prison and your well-being is out of your control, and it can fluctuate from day to day without notice, and you're almost powerless in the direction of your life. Poverty is not about not having money now. It may manifest as such, of course. It may manifest as homelessness at a specific point in time. It may manifest as lack of income or unemployment or difficulty purchasing food, difficulty paying your water bills, difficulty paying, you know, paying back the loans that you took, you're paying back your mortgage, difficulty doing all of these kinds of things that we can associate with day-to-day living. But poverty is really this superstructure in which so many of us are thrown into, where, like a prison, we have very limited, reign over our situation. Let me give you some tangible examples. What I have come to see of poverty, especially here in Detroit, is that people might have a seemingly suburban life. They might live in homes that look very lovely from the outside. They might even drive cars, maybe even have two cars. They might even have college education, and they might even have the opportunity to eat out once in a while. They might have pretty good looking clothes, but they might still be in poverty. And this has been such a paradox to me, in the beginning at least, because we tend to associate poverty with the kind of imagery of a person who's constantly on the street, who's dressed dressed in old, tattered clothes, looking all beaten up and can barely afford to eat. And that is in itself an instantaneous, look at poverty. It does happen. It happens to very many people. But to think about poverty as a system, you begin to see this. What happens, as I see it, and as I have engaged with my friends and, you know, partners in thought and in this, struggle to find some sort of alternative way of living that liberates us from dependency on traditional employment, or and unfair employment standards and uh, terms and incomes. What you see is that, and you have to go back in time for a minute, because what happens is that in places like the US and in Africa, where certain groups of people in the US, you can take the Native Americans and the African Americans, and in the continent, you can look at the indigenous Africans, and even among them, there are certain specific ethnic nations who are disproportionately disenfranchised by the nation building process. And maybe these folks were either deprived legally, look at South Africa, deprived legally of access to, their land, access to spaces where they can grow their own food and provide for their families, or in the US where you're denied access to that kind of ownership, access to the vote, you're assaulted physically during the condition of slavery. You are not in yourself, your own self, you are property of somebody else. And even beyond slavery, there's the Jim Crow laws that were like apartheid, and these basically um, designated blacks as unequal to whites and denied them the same kinds of opportunities, benefits, and services. Think about grant money. Think about all those kinds of benefits that would have otherwise supported them to really rise out of slavery. Now, my point is that the condition of poverty for many people around the world is inherited. It is inherited because it is something that has happened over time, where their parents, their ancestors were progressively deprived of many of the fundamental things, material goods, psychological capacities, and ways of identification that would have allowed them to build opportunities for themselves, and really, most importantly, to build a space where they are able to meet, firstly, their most fundamental human needs. access to food, access to water, access to shelter. And the people who plundered all of these people accumulated, they hoarded a lot of this money, a lot of this land, a lot of this wealth, and they pretend to be redistributing it by employing poorer people and giving them wages that you cannot survive by, in terms of employment that you know are not humane. We do not consider their need for healthcare or health benefits or time off during paid leave during times of sickness or times of bereavement or times of maternity. And what happens is that this that I'm talking about is a product of a way of operating, a way of taking goods from the earth and producing goods and trying to sell, and a structured system called global capitalism, where the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. you know Now, I really want to ground this down for a minute. I'll give you the example of my partner in justice, Lorenzo. And Lorenzo obtained, he's the first within his home, his nuclear home, to receive a college degree. And his father went to high school, and his mother um, dropped out of college in her second year. And his father, throughout much of his life, has been taking various kinds of jobs, most of which uh, were in the automotive industry in Detroit, working with, Chrysler or General Motors, doing work that, if you hear him talk about, is ridiculously boring, repetitive, exhausting, because he would explain how, he used to take the night shift. Yeah, he took the evening and night shift. And he would, he would be here, he would leave in the evening and go work all through the night and come home in the morning when he had his young sons. And even with the kind of labor that he put in, which was mostly very, very manual, very, physical labor with no benefits, no decent benefits, it is difficult. It is difficult to make enough to afford, for example, to pay off a house or to pay off a car. And what happened is he took up he took up a mortgage for his house and loan for his truck, which he's been driving for a long time, and various other kinds of getting caught up in this kind of system where you need a good, but since you cannot pay upfront because you cannot afford to, you get into the credit system. And this credit system, basically run by financial institutions, knows you cannot afford, and they're also trying to make money out of you. And so they charge you as, a ridiculously high interest rate, because they're trying to get a lot more than what you actually. So how do I put this? How does an interest work? You take a loan worth 10,000, but by the time you ended up repaying it, you could even end up paying 30,000, right? And that's how these financial institutions work. And when it gets to a point where you're unable to pay back your interest or unable to pay back your mortgage, which is the same for houses, you you find yourself, in a situation where, you come upon some serious debt, and that ruins your credit worthiness, and you cannot seek any other kinds of financial opportunities. And other people also now use your credit rating to make judgments about who you are, and make statements like, you're lazy, or you're greedy because you took up a car, took up this, or cannot pay it back, and now you have poor credit score. But yet, to even make it to work, because the work station may be far away from where the residential spaces are, you'd have to get a car, you know, or to live reasonably. It makes more sense to attempt to buy the house than to keep paying rent and never get that money back. So, man, I just lost my train of thought there. Let me take a minute here for a second. Well, basically, what I'm just trying to say is, like, you know, let's take Lorenzo. So for Lorenzo to go to college, because his parents could not afford to pay for him, he had to take these federal loans for him to go to college. And you know why? Because they say, yeah, education is the best way to get out of what? Poverty, right? But you cannot afford education. So what do? If you have that potential and you have the interest, you have to take a loan, right? Now this, you take a loan, and the assumption is that you're going to be able to pay back that loan, because once you're done with your degree, you'll get a good job. You'll get a very nice high paying job, and you'll pay that loan like it was nothing, and jump on and become a good member of the middle class, or if you're lucky, a rich person. But as you know, you graduate from college, and you might have a loan like $50,000 from a debt. You might have needed all that because these colleges are expensive. Let's say you graduate with a $50,000 debt. Now, here you are with your degree, and you walk to the stage, and you're happy, and you're expecting a big paying job. And you send your resumes here, there, and everywhere. And you know what? You do not get any job offer that is decent. And if at all, first of all, you barely get any job offer within your particular career, circle, or you get an offer that is unreasonable, and you begin to realize that no way you're going to make that money to pay back that debt, because after you've graduated, you need a place to live. You're starting to pay rent. You need food. So the kind of revenue you're getting from your job, first of all, is paying your immediate living costs, and then paying back the government. Now, and this debt is also accruing interest. So what then happens if you're unable to pay back your, your monthly, what do you call that stuff? When you pay whatever interest you owe on the debt, is you're trying to clear that, and you're paying towards, the negation of your principal amount. You did I say, well, when you forget? Yeah, when you forget to, when you're unable to pay that back, right? You dent your credit score. When you dent your credit score, you're less likely to be considered for any other type of financial grants or loans by financial institutions. It becomes harder for you to get a house. It becomes harder for you to get an affordable car or a good insurance rate. And you get caught up in this situation where, because you decided to get out of poverty by going to college, you are now properly inside that poverty. And when I say poverty, I mean a situation where it's hand to mouth, where you cannot advance. It's like you're a hamster on a hamster wheel, and you're putting in the effort, but you can never go anywhere because it is ridiculously impossible. And I use Lorenzo's example because it's very immediate to me. I was lucky that I had my full tuition, college tuition was paid by Michigan State University through the Office of International Students and a bunch of other scholarships in different departments. So I do not have that kind of college debt. So any money I make, right, is not going to pay somebody else. That money is for me and to pay for my immediate needs. But any money he makes, as I've just explained, is paying for the cost of rent because we are renting where we are living, and it's paying for the cost of food, it's paying for the cost of water bills, it's paying for the cost of electricity, the cost of internet, and especially in the winter. And we have winter here like more often than we even have summer, as like from October, November till May. Yeah. During the winter, there is this cost called heating your house. And heating using gas is very, very expensive. And it does what? It costs money. So before you even pay back your government debt that was a result of you choosing to go to college, you have no money. You have no money. And because of this situation where you start to neglect your obligations to the financial institutions, your credit score dips. So Lorenzo's quoted insurance rate is out of this world. So we do not use car insurance. Like over, maybe 70% of Detroiters don't have car insurance because it is ridiculously expensive, especially in Detroit. And don't have any homeowners or any renters insurance. Of course, Lorenzo, until just recently, for the first time in a very long time in his life, just got health insurance because it is impossible when you're in this kind of a situation to pay for health insurance. And I do not have health insurance. Yeah. Our baby gets health insurance through the government through a program called Medicaid, right? And that is the way we are able to afford health insurance, at least for her. And I am not a welfare queen, and neither is he a welfare queen. But because of the nature of the circumstances I have lived, we need government assistance, right? At least for things like insurance for her, because it's impossible to pay. And the significance of insurance is that many times when people really need this healthcare, it's during emergency or these ailments that just creep up on you and explode. You might just be feeling okay, and because of the nature of our lifestyles, our diet, we are slowly developing a cancer or slowly developing a heart problem. And when it explodes and you go to the hospital, if you go into the emergency room, it is tremendously expensive, impossible to pay. And what this can do to you, it can take you into it can make you, what is it, solvency, or you become bankrupt. And that's why I'm saying poverty is like a prison. It's like a prison because, like, right now we have food on the table because we're able to sacrifice. um we don't pay back any of those debts. We do not pay for car insurance. We do not use TV services, which costs quite a bit of money. And, we do not go shopping for clothes and all that kind of stuff. We grow a lot during the summer. We don't buy eggs because we keep chickens. And we do have many neighbors that live around us, usually older neighbors, who always bring us stuff. We get, full turkeys from, we have an imam next door who always brings us turkeys and cans of beans, food. They bring us food, and just neighbors just feeling like they need to look out for us. Like if you look at our house, for example, when we moved into this house was in terrible condition. And I have been working on the before and after pictures, and I maintain a blog called Sustainable Living in Detroit, where I discuss this effort that we are undertaking and that our friends and mentors are undertaking to shift out of this system that locks so many of us in poverty and continues to enrich and empower other people. You know, a minority of people in this country, mainly white folks in the corporate sector, not even really in government, although there is a bit of, interchanging from, the corporate lobby section to the government and back. Yeah, so that's really what I wanted to talk about for now, because sometimes we think so simplistically about what poverty is, and talk like someone can just easily jump out of poverty. That's what poverty looks like. Poverty can have a home, can have a big car. Poverty can have, you might see poverty in a fancy restaurant sitting down there too, ordering some gourmet food once in a while, but that doesn't mean they're not in poverty. And sometimes poverty is on the street begging in the corner. But most times today, and many of us are sinking steadily into poverty, but we do not recognize it, because poverty is this way of entrapping so many of us, so that we are constantly dependent. We're constantly dependent on somebody else for a job. We're constantly dependent on somebody else to say, yeah, you're good enough to talk on a TV show. You're good enough to be a journalist, to write in the Detroit Free Press. You're good enough to be a nurse after paying $50,000 times four. You're good enough, you know, it's a cycle. It's a very terrible cycle where um, most of us, we we have been taught, and we are continuously being taught to, yeah, go get born, go to school, spend so much money so that you can work for this one person or this company, so that you can enrich them, and so that your um your life sustenance means is dependent on them and their mercy, and your ability to take care of yourself in terms of healthcare is dependent on whether they choose to offer you a employment condition that has health insurance, and your ability to eat well is dependent on where you work or who decides to pay you, and that is poverty. It's an entrapment. It's a form of slavery. That's what poverty is. So to get out of poverty is to pursue some freedom. It means to not be dependent or controlled by whoever is controlling your ability to sustain yourself, to provide food, clothing, shelter, freedom, leisure, healthcare, maternity leave. You know, that's what poverty is. And poverty is very immediate, and it's very central when we talk about how do we shift the status quo. Here in Detroit, in America, broadly speaking, in the USA, in the whole world, in the whole world, it needs us to get off the grid, off the grid and start building differently. And people are doing it. People are doing it, and it is not necessarily easy, but I think it is more pleasurable than the condition of, you know, our current, our current system. I personally can tell you that I'm very hesitant, for example, to take our daughter to school because I don't want her to fall into that system. For example, that track of, there you go, preschool, primary school, college, and then what? The job? Well, I will continue this in a second episode on the same topic. Thank you very much for watching. This is your Daily Fix with Atieno Katagam. Do subscribe.